Hello, I'm Jim Posner, and this is the Don't Panic Project. We provide conversations to help empower, inspire, and educate people suffering from stress, anxiety, and depression. Today's guest is Judi Glova. Judi enjoyed a successful career as an executive for Fortune 100 companies before turning her considerable talents and experience to helping others achieve their goals. She established Pinnacle Coaching and Consulting in 2005. Her mission is to help clients accelerate their success and produce more satisfying results in their careers and lives. So welcome, Judi.
Hi, how are you? Nice to be here.
Doing really well. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Don't Panic Project. So you were a successful executive at Fortune 100 companies for a while. And then, so
let me just tell you a little bit about that. So I started out in the pharmaceutical industry. So I was in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry for 17 years, the first 17 years of my career.
Wow.
And during that time, it was one of those decisions where I either had to go into the telecom, the telephone industry, or I went into drugs.
I would have chosen drugs also.
Right. Based on where I lived, it was like one of those two industries was probably where I was going to go. And I ended up in the pharmaceutical industry. And I ended up in a role in public relations. And it was because I was good at it. I was good at talking to people and I was good at connecting with people. But what was interesting is that I was constantly in a state of fear because it is one of those roles in an organization that has tons of exposure. And what they used to say is that you have, you're closest to the sun, meaning that you have a really close proximity to the leaders of the organization, and your mistakes get amplified, right? Because you're communicating with the outside world, whether it's the news media or investors or whatever. It was one of those positions that I was constantly under the scrutiny of everyone's opinions. And if I made any mistakes, like, when press releases went out, if I made any mistakes, everybody knew about it. So it was one of those really, it's actually kind of strange and coincidental and not coincidental at the same time, because I was raised to be like a perfectionist. My parents were super, critical in a way that they would notice what I did well, but it was always like with the tagline of, oh, but if you could have done this a little bit better, so I was always trying to not hear but if you didn't do this, or, oh, you missed that. Yeah. So it was like one of those early life conditionings of don't mess up, don't screw up.
Wow. So kind of setting the tone early on. And then you just said you were living in a state of fear during this job
constantly, every day that you walk into the office with a public relations job, you're constantly thinking about what crisis is happening. How am I communicating? How are we, making sure that our messages are getting out? And it's just a high exposure kind of job. So people who aren't really into that, that aren't into details and all that kind of stuff, it was, it's really stressful. And I'm actually not a detail-oriented person. That's why I had to constantly go against my preference. My preference is very big picture. Let's see the big picture. And PR is all about wordsmithing and details and getting things fine-tuned and tweaked just right. So it was one of those jobs that I was put into, or a career I was living in, that I was constantly in that state of anxiety.
I mean, it sounds like a high pressure situation. In many respects, you are the face or the voice of the company. What you're putting out is what the world is seeing and how you're representing the company. And I can see how the powers that be at the top could easily get aggravated if something is not written
everywhere. I mean, the nuances. Everywhere. Yeah, everybody had an opinion about my job. About whether or not I was doing it, whether it was marketing or legal or regulatory. I mean, everybody had an opinion and nitpicked everything that I did. Like it was like one of those situations, like, really, this is the kind of career I have. This is the kind of life I had growing up. And now I have it like 10 times. So, and here's the other interesting thing is, I didn't realize how much stress I was in. I didn't feel my feelings. I didn't really even pay attention to how intense I was living. It wasn't until like other people would tell me. I didn't even have a clue.
So what did other people tell you? What were their observations?
They would just tell me, like, you really take things really seriously, or, you must be really stressed out. And I was just like, yeah, like I kind of passed it off because, there's that story of, throwing a frog in water and like turning on the heat, and like, the frog will actually boil and die because it doesn't sense the temperature change. And that's exactly what I feel like. I felt like I was a frog because I was put into this role where it gradually over time got more and more and more pressure, and it didn't even feel strange. It was just like, oh, well, this is just how my life is. This is just how work goes. Like, that was my day-to-day experience.
Yeah.
And I would say that there was a huge aha moment. There was one time we were getting out news for a particular big study that we were doing on the drug that I was working on. And my boss had flown to Madrid. She was going to go to a medical meeting where they were announcing the information. And I remember shooting up in bed at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, in a panic, because I was afraid I had missed something in the press release, or like I had screwed something up, or I forgot to get somebody to approve something. And I was just like, oh no, this press release is going out like 6 a.m. my time. And I was like, oh my God, well, maybe I can wake her up and, talk to her. Well, because she was in Madrid, she was already awake, right? 3 o'clock, East Coast time. I forget what time it was in Madrid, but so I was able to call her, and she's like, Judi, what are you doing calling me? Like, I'm in Madrid, you're in New Jersey, what time is it? And she's like, you should be sleeping right now. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm really worried about this. And she's like, go back to bed. And then she realized, she's like, Judi, the press release isn't going out till tomorrow. Like, today's Sunday.
Right.
So it was like, I was getting up, in the middle of the night. It was just like that state of panic, and the pressure had finally reached a point where I felt it.
So to go back to the frog reference, it sounds like you were on the verge of boiling.
Oh yeah. That was the beginning of really realizing, like, yeah, I can't live like this. This job, this career was just too over the top for me. It had reached a point where I was really good at it, but I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I could do it. I could hack it, but I was hacking it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think also a lot of times when we start out a professional career, we're kind of programmed to believe that type of job is this real prestigious type of job, and we'd really enjoy it. I remember when I got out of college, I kind of was looking forward to having a job that, I would have to work 13 or 14 hours a day and be involved in important decisions and that type of thing. And I just had this idea that it would, create some sort of self-importance for me and so forth.
Oh, totally. It was my ego. It fed So Tony Robbins talks about the 6 human needs. And he talks about how, you can get an addiction to something if it meets your 6 human needs, which, they are certainty, uncertainty, connection, individuality or significance, and growth and contribution. And if you get, like, your job can actually meet all 6. And my job...
Certainty and uncertainty?
Huh?
Certainty and uncertainty?
Oh, sure, because I was certain I was going to get a nice 6-figure paycheck. And the uncertainty was every day I walked in the door and I had no idea what was going to hit me.
And that was a challenge for you. Like, and as
huge.
an executive, you like the challenges. So.
Oh yeah. And I got connection with all these great people. They were really smart. It was, an industry where there were really smart minds. There was a whole bunch of science involved, but, working with media and, television, all that kind of stuff. Plus, I got the individuality of saying like, I was the spokesperson. So huge ego boost. And then the growth, again, every day I was learning and stretching and then the contribution, because even of the industry that I worked in, like we literally sometimes were giving people information that could save their lives. So right. It's like you have this sense of like, oh my God, this job can meet all of my 6 human needs in the world. And I was addicted to it.
So you started to succumb to the stress of the job. So what happened next? How'd you make your way out? And move out of the corporate.
Great question.
That's a hard decision for somebody who identifies with that and clearly strove to kind of be in a position.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it was my daily fix. It's like it's like the drug of choice. So what happened was serendipity. So my company was actually acquired by a larger pharmaceutical company, and I got a nice package. And I'm like, okay, I'll make the break now. I knew that I wanted to go into coaching and whatnot, but yet I was a little scared. So I ended up taking one more corporate job. So I took another corporate job, and it was executive communications, and it really was that kind of role where I got to be in a company and doing coaching with executives. Even though it was with public relations, it was very specifically helping executives with their interpersonal communication skills. So I actually it was a dream job in some ways, and it was a nightmare in others. It was like the perfect reason to leave, because I had a situation where my 2 bosses, the 2 people that I had to report to, it was such oil and water. So it made it easy to finally leave. But what I did was I was studying to get my certification in coaching. I studied to get my certification in emotional intelligence development. So it was like all these things I was doing that led me up to being able to step out of that job. And really, I literally left the company. It was July 15th, 2005. And I already had enough corporate clients lined up that I basically didn't miss a beat. I kept my same salary.
Wow.
And so for it's been 14 years now. So yeah, and it's really been a journey. But with that said, being a coach has been so life-changing for me because I'm a lifelong learner. I am constantly making sure that I'm investing in myself, because as a coach, I can only help somebody to the degree that I have either done the work on myself or I have grown and developed. So in the past, 14 years, every year I've invested in myself, whether it's learning different techniques and tools about anxiety and dealing with anxiety. I even am a certified Kundalini yoga teacher, which really enables me to use mantra and mudra and Kundalini yoga kriyas to, prescribe to people to help them. Then, the emotional intelligence development that that training that I had has been huge in terms of my corporate clients. And also I got my master's in spiritual psychology. And it's so interesting because when I got my master's in spiritual psychology, I realized that was when I was like, oh my God, I don't feel my feelings. I was numb. And that is truly when I had that, the palm to forehead moment of like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Huge life transformation.
So let's talk a little bit about some of these more recent steps. So just to start out, what exactly is emotional intelligence?
So emotional intelligence is really our ability to manage our own state as well as be aware and conscious of others. So, it has to do with your self-awareness. It has to do with how well you have awareness of others. They call it sensory acuity. You know, like, can you step into a room and notice other people and kind of get the vibe? You know, so, you know, it's like your spidey sense.
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man had his sense, you know, it's like having that. It's being able to make decisions. And what I call, and emotional intelligence decision making, I call it playing with a full deck, because you want to be able to use your logical mind, you know, the if this then that mind, but you also want to tap into, how is this going to emotionally impact others? What's the impact going to be, right? Because the intention can be from the head, but the impact comes from the heart, and it impacts the heart. And so just being able to do, you know, being able to notice that. Then it's self-regulation. You know, how am I emotionally, you know, containing myself? And how do I regulate, especially when my emotions get hijacked or triggered? And that, I mean, that I have to say is probably the most critical and thing that I can help people with, because when you can pause and have that moment of reflection, and here's the thing, even for me, I mean, my biggest aha moment, and this is going to probably sound so insignificant, but it was when someone was coming at me and blaming me for something. And I really had the aha moment of like, hey, wait a minute. How is this about me? How is this not about me? And maybe this is about you. And it was that like little tiny aha moment where I didn't respond like it was my fault. Like that was my huge emotional intelligence aha, because I was such a people pleaser. I was all about pleasing other people, being perfect, trying to not make mistakes, right? So for me to be able to pause and reflect and say, yeah, that's not me. That's you, and I can own my piece, but I don't have to own all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Tara Brach, a famous meditation teacher and author. She talks about the sacred pause and cultivating the skill of learning how to act instead of reacting. And
huge, yes,
really
that
powerful.
Yes,
really
and that to me is all about emotional intelligence, because when you can pause, have that self-reflection, have that notice of other people, being able to manage other people's emotions. That's the sixth part of emotional intelligence, is being able to manage yourself, but also being able to manage others' emotions.
Yeah. And that pause is really, it's all about intention. I mean, it can be a split second that you're pausing, but it's that intention to just take a breath and a pause before you react and say something you're going to regret.
Right. And the other thing that I even learned about leadership is that, you know, leadership, you can have an intention of being able to deliver, you know, a kind message, but it's also understanding your impact. You know, like what energy does your message ride on? You know, does the message ride on being kind and caring, or does it kind of come with an edge? You know, like you can give anybody a piece of feedback, and if it's got that little edge to it, the impact is much different than, you know, if it rides on kindness and compassion. Yeah.
I would also say that good leaders have cultivated the skill of that pause. It really creates a much higher sense of presence in, you know, people that have the ability just to take that pause and not react and, you know, act with intention. They have a much higher sense of presence. They really do. And I've noticed that in skillful leaders. And actually, Amy Cuddy, who's done a lot of research on body language and so forth, she has a book entitled Presence, and she talks about that as well. Interesting book. So let me ask you, Judi, do you have any tips on how to cultivate the skill of taking a pause?
Absolutely. So I think one of the key things I think meditation. Honestly, I think if you say that you don't even have 5 minutes to meditate, you probably need a half an hour.
Yes.
Right. So I think number one is just being mindful and practicing the slowing down, and practicing the inner work is what gets reflected in the outer world. So most people have it backwards. They think they need to learn leadership and they need to learn this stuff. you basically really just need to build that bridge back to your heart, back to your consciousness, your conscious awareness. And when you can get a sense of, who you are and the truth of who you are, it makes it much easier to slow down. That would be my number one. My number two is listening, active listening. Because so many times we're not listening to really hear people. We just listen so that we can think about what we're going to say next.
That's so true. So true. Yeah, amazing.
And then the other thing I would say is, being able to ask yourself, the third thing I would say is examine what your primary question is. So what that means is that, like, when I would be with people, I noticed that my primary question was always, what do they want from me? Right? So what do they want from me? What do they want from me? So even unconsciously, as I was meeting with people, I would have that constant dialogue in my head of, what do they want? What do they want from me? What do they want from me? So I had to actually be aware of my primary question and then change it of, what am I here? How am I here to serve? And sometimes just by having that different question, I don't come from that place of always being defensive. It's somebody said to me, it's like that, that warrior that's still at war, even though the war is over, or there's no war to fight, there's a story about a bunch of soldiers that got stranded on an island, and the war had literally, I think it was like World War I or World War II was over, and they were constantly prepared for battle. And then they finally found them on this island, and they thought that World War II was still going on, and it wasn't. And it's like, I had to learn not to be the warrior, like not to be the soldier constantly on patrol.
Yeah.
For war. Like, not everybody is there to hurt me, you know?
Yeah, it's almost, you're flipping the switch in a sense. So instead of what do they want from me, almost what can I do to help them?
Yeah. And how can I be of service? Or, what is this moment? What can this moment teach me? That's even a more empowering question.
Absolutely. But, it also touches on another theme, which I have talked a lot about in a lot of these conversations I've had, which is compassion. And when you switch that mindset from what do they want from me to what can I do for them, or how can I help them? How can I be in service to them? Your whole mindset switches, and it's just a better place to be. And typically the people that you are having the conversation with can actually pick up on that switch in the mindset, and it creates more of an openness. And in general, you both stand to gain from that switch in the mindset. When it goes right back to emotional intelligence, instead of just
exactly
me. You're kind of opening the door, and when you open the door, things can.
Because you stop caring so much about yourself that you can open up and realize, like, I can be open and caring, and I don't have to be in control. I don't have to be, defensive or feeling like I have to protect myself. And when the protection or the defensiveness kind of goes away, it just gives you, it's like you can just breathe. Like, even just saying that, I'm like, I can relax because I can have compassion for myself. Then I can have compassion for others. So I love the point that you were making, because the compassion has to start with us first. Again, it's an inside job. To me, everything is about how am I communicating with myself internally, because that's what creates my outer world, right? So it's the inside out, always the inside out. And people just make that huge mistake that they think it's everything I'm going to learn on the outside that's going to help me on the inside. And it's totally the other way around.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying in the beginning of this conversation, how you said you couldn't feel your feelings, so there was a lack of awareness, another term we had mentioned, which is awareness is another word for mindfulness. And as you know, I'm involved in mindfulness, and you obviously are as well. So it's this awareness of our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. And, you know, before I practiced mindfulness, I just had all of that stuff buried inside. And what happens is it's buried inside until it erupts in, you know, stress, panic, and anxiety. So when you start to practice meditation and mindfulness, what happens is you cultivate this higher level of awareness of your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions. And instead of those thoughts, feelings, and emotions controlling you, you then become able to control your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And if you think about it, I believe that is one of the most powerful skills that anybody can have, is to be able to control their thoughts, feelings, and emotions instead of have them 100%. Control you.
100%. And I think the other piece of it is, I'm just going to dovetail or reiterate what you were saying. It's like when you have that mindfulness internally, you're self-referenced as opposed to worrying about what everybody else is feeling. And I don't know about you, but it's almost like I was out of balance of, I didn't worry about me. I worried about protecting me, but I always was other referenced. I was always worried about, well, how do you feel? Or what are you going to think of me? Right? So everything was outside, outside, outside. But when I got mindful and I got conscious awareness of who my thoughts, feelings, and emotions, right?
Yeah.
When I got that, that's when I had a huge shift in my life. I mean, things really, really changed.
Same with me. I
Cool.
was able to bring that higher level of awareness to all the stuff that I had buried, you know, for years. And, you know, it manifested itself in a couple of panic attacks and you know, some anxiety for a while, no doubt. And since I started the practice, I have never had another panic attack since. So
that's awesome. That's brilliant. Fantastic.
Very, very powerful. So tell us what you're doing now, Judi. I know you're an executive coach, but who do you target, and what's your kind of methodology for working?
Yeah. So for the past 14 years, I've always been focused on emotional intelligence development. That's been the basis. That's how I launched my business. And that's just grown over time. And it's funny. It's like, I don't always call it emotional intelligence. You know, it sometimes takes different meaning, you know, different names, but I'm always pointing to that. And it's the combination of emotional intelligence and interpersonal communication skills. Because again, where I come from, my point of view is how you're communicating with yourself, the internal, is what gets expressed externally. So the type of people that I really, really work with are, you know, the people in corporations where, you know, they're having a hard time like cutting through. Because like when you go into a meeting and it's totally getting derailed and you're not the one that can, like, you just feel stuck and you can't step in and communicate effectively to get things back on. Or you're the type of person who, you know, you hear from your boss, like your boss keeps giving you all this stuff because you're the go-to person. You can get it done. Right. But you never have the voice to say, hey, wait a minute, I can't do all of this. But you're so buried and you're deeply conflicted inside because you're consumed by your job. And you just want to be able to communicate effectively how this is impacting you and get a solution to get out of that intense frog burning pressure. You know, You don't want to be the frog in the pot. And then I also deal with entrepreneurs that have their own companies. And some of these people, Jim, they're so successful. They've made the goal of, like, you know, the 6 or 7 figure company. And they, you know, on the outside, they have it all. On the inside, they are miserable. They just want to sell their company. They're like, I'm done. You know, I've done it all and I'm so unhappy because they're so used to doing everything for everybody else. Their tank is empty and they've just reached that point where they just can't take it anymore. And, you know, they usually, you know, say things like, you know, enough already. You know, they just get to that really unhappy place. And because they are such A players, right? Type A personality.
Yeah.
They don't feel that they can say anything to anybody. You know, secretly on the inside, they want somebody to talk to and to get help from. But number one, they're afraid to ask for help sometimes. And number two, like their friends will say, oh yeah, you got it all. Oh, please. Yeah. Stop complaining. Stop your bitching. Because on the outside, everything looks awesome. But they secretly are really suffering on the inside because, you know, either they're the corporate person that's, you know, the people pleaser that can do it all and is really super capable and super smart. And they don't want to be the one that says, I can't.
Yeah.
You know? So those are the people that I help the most, and have amazing success with being able to help them learn how to say no, learn how to get mindful and conscious, you know, get that inner outer balance so that they are focusing on themselves as much as they are focusing on others and business. Because when you're out of balance and you're not, you know, you don't have that, that kind of equilibrium. And I do think it's a myth to have work-life balance. I think that's kind of BS, but you can find your own set point or, you know, greater harmony of the inside and the outside. Because to your point, if you're constantly pushing all that stuff down, it's just building up. It's like, you know, sweeping the dirt underneath the rug. It eventually gets a little bump, you know, and eventually you've got to vacuum it up. You know, you got to clean it up. You got to get the dustpan out and you got to like clean up that stuff.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
What would be your number one piece of advice for somebody that is, I would say, let's say in the midst of burnout or just not happy with their current work or job situation?
Yeah, I mean, if they really do get to that point that they feel as though they keep doing the same thing over and over again and they're not getting traction, they're not moving forward, I do believe that being able to ask for help, and, you know, it doesn't have to be me, it just has to be, you know, learn something new, become curious about how you can do things differently, and, you know, tap into that, pay attention to that intuitive sense of what's my next step? How can I listen to that voice inside my head that's not telling me, it's not beating me up, but it's that little quieter voice that says, hey, try this. Hey, try that, you know, and maybe it's one step of starting to meditate and commit to that every single day. Maybe that's one thing. You know, the second thing would be to actually go out and ask for support and guidance and help. And then I think the other thing is just be honest with yourself.
Right.
Like really be honest with yourself.
You know, I think your suggestion of asking for help is the most important on many levels, and it's also the most difficult. Again, in Western society, we've just been trained to, you know, unfortunately put up this wall, and there's still, I think, a touch of negativity or stigmatism attached with saying you're, you know, going to the psychiatrist or the psychologist, or looking for help or career help or whatever the case may be. And it's really unfortunate because I think that is the best way for people to go about.
My dog.
That's all right. Hey,
my dog was just jumping down. Sorry about that.
We like dogs, but, you know, people, that's how you can get unstuck, by going and talking to people. I mean, very, very important.
And I also would say, like, there was a time, like I said, when I couldn't even feel my feelings. I didn't even know what was going on, but listen to the other people that are noticing the changes in you. Because there's actually some literature written about how when you're in the grip, they call it the grip, you don't even, and that's like a high overstressed. So good, you know, we have a certain level of stress that's good for us. But once we hit that overstressed place, that's where we become dysfunctional. We make poor decisions. We can't sleep. We can't think. All of that stuff happens. So when you hit that point, you're the last one to know. But other people notice that shift because they're like, oh my gosh, like that is just like not you. So when you start hearing people say like, what's up with you? That's probably a key indication. And, you know, if you're one of those people out there listening right now and people are saying that about you, you may want to take a step back and be like, maybe I do need to, you know, do this differently, because we just we get in ruts. We just keep on trying to figure it out ourselves. And sometimes we just can't.
I agree 100%. Absolutely. So Judi, where can people get in touch with you now?
Oh, great. Yeah. So they can get in touch with me. I'm on all platforms, you know, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. They're all great places to find me. They can just look, you know, basically just search my name, Judi Glova, Judi Glova, GLOVA.com, or they can actually email me, Judi Glova at pinnacle-coach.com. And it's really a pleasure to be able to, you know, support people and answer any questions about how they can move forward.
Thanks. And I have to say, I love having these conversations. They're always so insightful. For me, it's really a lot about awareness. You know, there's that term again. So people can understand that, hey, you're not the only person that maybe has gone through a difficult time or is going through a difficult time. You know, there is a solution, and, you know, just ask for a little help, and you know, look for it and you shall find it. So Judi, thank you so much for being on the Don't Panic Project. And I'm Jim Posner, and through these conversations, we're aiming to help provide tools and awareness to those suffering from stress, anxiety, and depression. You can see more great conversations at www.thedon'tpanicproject.com or on my YouTube channel. And you can contact me at jimposner@themindfuladvantage.com. And I work with smart, forward-thinking people, corporations, schools, and athletes to help them harness the power of mindfulness to manage stress and achieve peak performance. Thanks again, and see you next time on the Don't Panic Project.
You're awesome.
Thanks, Jude. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.